Andrew Castle is the voice of Wimbledon. For 20 years, he's been broadcasting from SW19 on the TV and radio alongside the likes of John McEnroe, Tim Henman and Boris Becker. Before that, he was a globe-trotting tennis player until he met his wife, decided to hang up his racket and chose a different path. There is no one better to hear from, however grumpy, ahead of the championships.
How do you deal with failure? Are you kidding me? I went nuts in the 80s. And that's interesting to me, is where hunger comes from.
What next? As with every sports person, what happens after the curtain comes down on a playing career?
And I just sort of stopped operating the car for a minute, and Sophia said, that's enough now. And that was it. And I never went back. Talking therapy with Georgie. Can we do this once a week?
Andrew, this is probably the worst day to have you on because you've just been to the dentist and you're probably in a vile mood. Is that sort of a fair assessment of your current state of mind?
I don't have to go to the dentist, Georgie, to be in a vile mood at my age. I mean, I'm quite good at being in a vile mood at all times. Some days I wake up just in a vile mood and I think to myself, did I have something to drink last night? Red is the normal culprit. But I don't know, whether it's age or attitude or I'm sick and tired of being nice to people after 60 years. But either way, I woke up grumpy, but then I had a workout, so I feel quite virtuous now. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. I've not had time for a workout today, and I do have to say, I think it makes the world of a difference to how I live the rest of my days out. You know, if I do something of some note in the gym of a morning, the rest of my day goes according to plan. I don't know if that's the same for you, but exercise is like the tonic.
Look, just 15, 20, 25 minutes, anything. Anything just to be physical. It's just too much of a part of what I do now, and it sounds like it is for you as well. It's just vital. Otherwise, my head can go off in weird and terribly conspiratorial and hateful directions. And I don't want that because, you know, I can be nice, and it's better to be nice and full of energy than to be horrid and sharp and snappy.
Well, I want to talk to you in a bit more detail about this idea that over time, playing a particular role in life, as you will have done, and I definitely also did as a broadcaster, where you're a people pleaser inside people's houses and people listening to you in the car and whatever that might look like. It sort of turns you into a particular type of person. I want to talk to you about that in a moment, but I just want to take everyone back to the beginning and how it all sort of started for you, because you weren't always a broadcaster, of course. You were a tennis player first. And how did sort of your upbringing and your childhood sort of shape where you are now and the person that you became, do you think?
God. Well, I mean, if anybody is silly enough to ever book me for a speech or anything like that, or if I've got to sort of hold a mic and, you know, go and talk to actual real people, I do normally start by trying to answer that question. And, you know, I played professional tennis in 50 countries. And I lost in every one of them. And so, you know, it made me bitter and twisted, angry, resentful, jealous. But I was all those things probably beforehand. Look, I come from a working class background. People don't think that tennis players do come from that background. They think that they're all middle class and from Surrey or the home county somewhere. And they joined the local tennis club because their parents played there. And it was just a world of marvelous silver spoons, privilege and eating swan most meals. But it wasn't that. I grew up in a fish and chip shop, the youngest of five. We had no money at all. And our mutual friend, Annabelle Croft, I remember getting into a wonderful row with Annabelle because she's so passionate about so many things, about privilege and everything else. And she said, where there's a will, there's a way. And I hate to admit it, but she's right, mostly. For some people, there is no way. The reason why there was a way for me to continue to play tennis, to excel to a degree and to change my life was mum and dad and the rest of the family who were willing to look after me, give me or fill the car with petrol, which was difficult. I used to stay in a bed and breakfast or with whoever it was at tournaments. I needed equipment. I needed coaching. And that's, you know, some people don't have that opportunity, but I did because of mum, dad, James, Richard, David, Fiona, and me. I'm the youngest of five by 5 years. So I was the mistake. And I'm glad I'm here to tell the tale. But that's the bottom line is there are lots of bridges when you look back. If you're not privileged, or if you don't have parents that really want to give, you look back and you think, well, who built those bridges? And sometimes it's many years after you look back and go, Christ, you know what? If that hadn't happened, that couldn't have happened. And may I mention one more as well?
Yeah.
Colin Atkinson, who became Sir Colin Atkinson, the headmaster of Millfield School. At the age of 11, I'd won the under-12 national championships in Taunton. I was living in Taunton, and he came over the Somerset levels, Sedgemoor. I mean, the headmaster of Millfield knocking on our door and having a cup of tea in our kitchen with the lino on the floor and all the rest of it, a mug of tea, the headmaster of Millfield, and said, I hope you don't mind, Mrs. Castle, but we'd like to offer Andrew a full scholarship to Millfield. I mean, you look back and you go, well, what if that hadn't happened? Now, did I have a great time there? No, not really. I was an unhappy child at that stage, mum and dad divorcing, so everybody has a set of complexities. It's never easy for anybody, not all the way through. But I do look back and I thank people like that. And there were many others.
That must have been bloody hard though, because you go from, like you say, this working class background and the fish and chip shop and everything else into we are talking about a world of privilege within Millfield, and you have a scholarship into that system. So was that all part of the problem, that it was hard to adjust, hard to settle, difficult to make friends in that environment, or what were the sort of the touch points that made that a bit of a struggle?
Well, I was a day boy for a start. So he came over from Taunton each day. The head of chemistry lived in Taunton, so I came over in his Triumph 3000 each day. But I mean, I look back now at some of the people who I was in a class with, and I recognize their names from, there's one that is a great sort of shipping family. There was I had no idea about their existence. I was a day boy. They were at Millfield proper, in a way. I was very much a loner. I probably had one or two friends there, but tennis was the thing that sort of, was always the thing that I returned to. That was actually what I clung to. That was my life raft, because without that it actually became too important at times to win, or to. It was my card to play, and it made it desperately important to win, or to be appreciated, or whatever it was that drove me in that way. And people will say, "Well, you were only 80 in the world or whatever," but it really wasn't easy. From particularly, I think, from that background, it certainly gives you a hunger if you are. Now, my story is as nothing compared to many people that you will have to talk to, and many stories that we will know. But many people have gone by the wayside who had more. And that's interesting to me, is where hunger comes from. I was desperate for it. Would I do it all the same again? No, I wouldn't. But God, I'm amazed, given the circumstances that we all faced in the family, that I was able to become a professional tennis player from that background, because it's quite a rare thing. And I'm, if I may say so, quite proud of it now.
And you must have really, like you say, you clung to it because it gave you something. I mean, it's so similar to Ben's story. When I talked to Ben about, the early days of sailing and his experience at school and not really fitting in and actually clinging to sailing as the thing that was his salvation, it feels very similar. And I'm sure there are many people that share this likeness in this tale. So therefore, with that in mind, and why winning became so important, how did you deal with losing? How did you deal with losses? I mean, how was that for you? I mean, so many people talk about how failures taught them more than success, but I mean, what did that look like for you growing up and going through the ranks?
Well, how does he deal with it? I mean, what can you say about how he deals with it now?
It's really interesting because he's very pragmatic about it. He's very much, if I've done the preparation and I've been given the tools to win, and I've done the graft to put myself on the start line in the strongest possible position, after that, it's it will be what it will be. And
Okay.
he's really philosophical
Yeah.
about it. And I really struggle with that because standing from the sidelines looking in, I'm like, no, 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 no. All the components are there. You've got everything you need to succeed. Surely it's an absolutely crushing defeat should you lose from here. But he sees it a different
Yeah.
way. So, I mean, that's the difference between me not being a professional sports person and him being one, I guess.
Well, but you're a professional presenter and broadcaster, and you make your preparations. You know that if you have made them, the show should go well. If you then have a bad show, how do you feel? I'm sorry, I know you're the one supposed to be asking the questions, but it's
It's like
conversational.
therapy.
How do you... Yeah, thank you. That'll be 50 guineas. Yeah, well, we all got to talk it out. It's like, whatever it is called, behavioral therapy, talking therapy with Georgie. Can we do this once a week?
Yeah, it's actually really helping me.
So we can get this out. Oh, well,
What was the
how do I
question?
medicate? How do we medicate when we're pissed off
Oh, do you
and
see,
upset and feel like
I haven't figured that out. I haven't remotely figured that out yet. And I think I've
you
got
haven't?
more impossible with age as opposed to more tolerant.
Yeah,
Because I
yeah,
sort of know
yeah.
even more so nowadays what I want from myself and what I want from those around me. So I think I've probably become slightly more impossible than I was before.
I take it out on the children. That's the best thing. But, go and kick a cat. No, oh no, listen, we can't go down this road. Because how do you deal with failure? Are you kidding me? I went nuts in the 80s. Absolutely, I went nuts. I did everything from blaming everybody to road rage to anger to all of it. You lash out and you kick. Now you hear the broadcast. Now you see in the old days the bloke on GMTV or doing the tennis. There are people who are quite surprised at my language at
I was
times
going to say
when not on air.
this is genuinely shocking because to most, well, not necessarily to me, but to most people, outwardly facing, looking in at you, you are the face and the voice of calm and
Really
consideration
amazing, isn't it?
and contemplation and eloquence. The idea that you would get quite
It's
so
very kind.
hot-headed and throw all your toys out the pram doesn't feel very much like the same person. But I guess that's the thing, isn't it? It's a the person that is outwardly
Yeah.
is a particular way isn't always what's going on behind the scenes.
Which one is real? I mean,
Yes.
or are we all? I mean, we're all reasonably complicated cats. I mean, everybody's broadcasting the whole time.
Yeah.
Where's the reality of it all?
But let's take it back to when you
Okay.
first started out on that particular journey on the broadcasting one, because so you find yourself in the States, in America, and obviously at university there, which must have been a tremendous experience, wasn't it, at that time? That must have been fantastic.
Well, I'd still recommend going to American university for a young tennis player. In fact, more of them from the UK are doing it now, and it's become more something that the LTA are keen on as well. I mean, the results are there for all to see. Look, go and immerse yourself in a culture where winning is really applauded. Success is
Yeah.
not suppressed and looked down upon. Success is expected as well. Standards are high, and quite frankly, for a young guy in the UK, very few of them are ready to go pro at 18, 19, 20. I mean, the physicality's not there. They haven't been exposed to enough great sport, great tennis, a culture of winning. So, I would still recommend going. And also, the girls are great, and you're going to have a good time. Go and be social and have an awesome thing. Go. You might. We actually didn't have. I mean, this is terrible. There was no internet. So in those days, where I was in my trailer park, because I am trailer trash, my trailer park in Florida, and then in Wichita, Kansas, in this absolute dive that I lived in. I'm actually quite glad that nobody saw where I was, but you were quite a long way away in those days. Now the world is a smaller place, and in many ways that's a good thing. But it was an amazing experience. And again, there's the bridge. At 17, having a fire and brimstone Baptist minister for a coach who who'd come round on a Saturday night, and if there was as much as a match or a bottle of beer open, or anything like that, if he saw anything he didn't like, he would run us to exhaustion. And, it would, without doubt, be called abuse now. And what I saw it as was a necessary step. Looking back, chuffed to bits that we all went through that year together. Some people stayed on for the second year. It was junior college to start with. So an amazing formative experience, rather like being in the army. You had to be up to standard or forget about it. You're out. So not that I know what it is to be in the army, but I would imagine it's something like that. It was a military training that we did, and it enabled me to become a pro tennis player. It was the best year of my life in terms of improvement. I reckon I improved 30% in 3 weeks, the first 3 weeks.
Wow.
It was just unbelievable. So
that's again kind of harking back to the preparation piece, isn't it? Like if you're super well prepared, which you then were, you probably felt for the tour. So then, what was your experience of being a tennis player on the tour like, and what are your sort of your best sort of memories and highlights and thoughts from that time when you reflect on it?
Well, I would say with 2 months to go after 4.5 years in America, and that is condensing a good story into nothing, but doesn't matter. With 2 or 3 months to go, I was helping the team because I'd finished my 4 years of uni. So I was helping them as a sort of graduate assistant. In other words, I could hit with them, help out, and these were my old teammates. Because I thought I'd stay the 6 months extra to try and graduate, because while I was there, I might as well get a degree, And I didn't really know what I was going to do. Everyone thinks it's this sort of, cruise through, and then this happened, then I played Wimbledon. It's like, no one knows, right? No one knows. You never know when you're going to turn an ankle over for a start, but no one knows whether they're good enough. Not a single person. I mean, listen, there might be an Agassi or a Sampras or Boris or something, but, I certainly didn't know I was good enough to be a pro. And there was a professional player who came back to join us at Wichita for a week or two, and I played him, and I beat him. And he says to me, because he had his doubts about, because we're talking, what are you going to do, Andrew? I said, I don't know. And he said, well, just so you know, you're good enough to go professional. And I was like, and that was the first time anybody had ever said that. And then I beat somebody else, 6-love, who I'd been struggling to beat for 4 years, and he said, you're ready. I remember it distinctly. His name was Bill Nichols. He was our assistant coach and not that much older than us. And he says, you're ready. And I'm like, really? But my attitude wasn't ready. My lifestyle wasn't ready. But, and I wasn't fit enough. I wasn't strong enough. And I never was. And I should have, that's what I would have changed. But I did go pro, and I did have an impact quite quickly. And actually, to be quite honest, Georgie, I got quite bored with the life very quickly, because at the end of the day, hitting a fluffy ball over a net, and traveling economy around the world is not exactly fantastic. There are some very high highs, but for the most part, there's a lot of loneliness. Again, would I do it differently? Yeah, I'd have won Wimbledon a couple of times, and then a white limo is going to pick you up and put you in a 5-star resort, most of which will be yours. But for me, it wasn't. It was that existence was not quite like that.
But it's interesting what you say about the idea that you needed to be told by others that you were ready, and that it wasn't an instinctive or a natural sort of understanding within you that was the case. You actually did need to be sort of, and then that sort of sparked this determination, which was already there, but also the consolidation of that to go out and win stuff. So is there such a thing as this sort of, this getting into this mindset of this winning habits piece?
Yeah, well, there's nothing like, until you've done it, you don't know you can do it. Do you remember the first time you went on air when it really mattered?
Yeah,
was it?
I do.
Where?
It was actually horrendous, because we were broadcasting at the time that the Twin Towers came down.
Great.
So I remember,
God.
I remember that really fundamentally is forever ingrained in my memory. And I remember thinking at the time, it's really interesting. I must have been about 23, And I remember my boss saying to me a few years earlier, because I always wanted to do news as opposed to sports news. And he said, you're just not ready and you won't be for a while. And I remember thinking, I am ready. See, I was the opposite to you. I was like, I am ready. I absolutely could do this. But then that happened. And of course, it was an outlier of an event to take place. But when it happened, I realized how right he was and that I absolutely was not ready. Because in that moment, had I been sat in the news hot seat as opposed to the sports news hot seat, how I would have managed to deliver under a sort of calm and measured demeanour what needed to be said. I just don't think I would have found the words. I don't think I would have known how to handle it. And I think it would have been quite scarring.
23. I mean, you know, that's interesting. You see, at the age of 23, you've had your whole life up until that, you know, but actually now you're older than that and you've been through more and you've seen things in life. Now you've got a greater perspective, and we go on, you know, as long as we're open, continuing to take all these things on board. But that hunger to be on air and to have a crack and have a go is wonderful, isn't it? That vigor.
Yeah.
That's very, very difficult.
I can't imagine ever not knowing what you wanted to do in the world. I can't imagine ever that perspective that so many young people have, which is, I just don't know what I want to do with my life. I can't imagine what that looks like because I never ever felt it. And I suppose I'm really intolerant of people that feel that way because I just don't understand how they can't not know what they want to do. But of course, some people don't. Of course, that's a journey, isn't it?
Well, what I can't bear is if people have no get up and go, and I wonder where their motivation went, or you know, to be honest, it's often a background, isn't it, of expectation, love, discipline, structure, you know, which it's actually quite a privilege to have people who actually care. So, you know, and want you to do well. I mean, that's without that. Can you imagine? Or without an education, or to be born with that. I mean, so those things. Yeah. You know, we were lucky enough to have people around us to push. But I mean, if somebody doesn't get up off their ass and actually have a go, I'm not going to listen to your whining.
But what about the love of it? I mean, I sort of said to you there that I just never thought I'd do anything but broadcast. And that was always because it was a sort of a deep-rooted passion. I was always that kid who put my hand up in class and insisted on reading every chapter of the book in any one lesson, which much to the amusement of all my friends and pals who'd be like, yeah, you crack on, we're fine just sitting here not doing it. But what was it for you? I mean, was it because you obviously had this great passion, which was tennis, and had fulfilled so much in that area of your life? But then what next? As with every sports person, what happens after the curtain comes down on a playing career? What do you do next? How did that transition happen?